Welcome to Constant Variables, a podcast where we take a non-technical look at mobile app development. I'm Tim Bornhold. Let's get nerdy. So today we're speaking with Tom from the mobile app Kindu. So Tom's a medical doctor. He actually created Kindu with his buddies from medical school. And Kindu is an app which, in his words, helps couples explore in and out of the bedroom. So what that means is you and your partner each have your phones. You download the app and you independently answer a series of questions of things that you might be into, in the bedroom. So you might be into hair pulling. You might be into a librarian fantasy, whatever it might be. But you individually answer those questions, yes, no, or maybe. Then you partner up together. The app will pair you guys together, and then it will show you the answers that both of you answered yes or maybe. It doesn't show any of the ones that you said yes to and the other person didn't. So that way you can kind of have some privacy and feel free to express yourself without any potential embarrassment or anything like that that comes around this area. So it's really a cool app that can help couples really become even more intimate with each other. So I wanted to bring Tom on the show because the app it's doing incredibly well. It has hundreds of thousands of users all around the world. And we've been working with Tom for a few years at the Jed Mahonis Group on evolving this product. So I wanted to speak with him about several different topics. But today you're going to learn, for example, the best way to protect your users' data, which you'll come to hear is just collect as little of it as possible, how you can take an evidence-based approach to designing your app, and how to best deal with a global audience. So without further ado, here's my interview with Tom. All right, Tom, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Tim.
Glad to have you here. So we've been working together on Kindu for a while here, and I feel like every time I have to describe what Kindu is to somebody, I need to take a second and think of a good way to phrase exactly what the app is. So I thought I'd ask the master himself, how do you describe Kindu to somebody who's never heard of the product before?
Well, I describe it as an app that helps couples explore in and outside the bedroom. It was originally started way back in 2008. After we got the idea in a sexual health class, and we started to learn all about how people have all these interests and fantasies, and we thought it would be a cool way to bring couples together in sort of that double blind matching type of algorithm, like similar to Tinder, even though Tinder wasn't around at that time. But we thought it would just be a safe way for people to opt into things and then find out where they match.
That's awesome. It was you and a couple of other people, right? Or was it just you?
Yeah, so it was a couple of med students and I, and it was a sexual health class that exposed us to every type of sexuality, so we were comfortable talking to our patients about it. And then somehow, it hit me. And at that point, I had a couple partners, and, we were going through all of our ideas, and we actually, rated what idea we thought was the best out of all our ideas. And then we ended up going with Kindu.
Nice. I'm glad you did. It is a really cool app. I've used it with my wife. It's an interesting one to try to once you get into it, it becomes more and more natural. But like you said, this is kind of a difficult subject for some couples to approach. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I guess for your users that aren't familiar, I mean, like I said, it helps couples explore, but a more detailed description is, it presents you with a series of ideas, and you vote them yes, no, or maybe, and then your partner votes them yes, no, or maybe, and then we just show you where you either say yes or maybe to, and it doesn't show the negatives. So, if your partner is not interested in something, they don't have to know that you were, and it's sort of a nice way to avoid some of the embarrassment of some discussions of fantasies. That was the original intent, and then it sort of morphed into more of a general, realizing that people people want ideas to go on dates, and people want ideas on where to travel, and so this also gives you a way of narrowing down, what you both want to do. So that's sort of the direction that we're now heading. So it started off as more of an in the bedroom type app, and now it's more expanded outside the bedroom. And in fact, that's more of the direction I'd like to head.
Right, and that makes a lot of sense. You kind of can corner the niche to start out. It's how we tell people you should start, is you start small, get the core idea down, and then kind of expand out from there as you figure out what your customers are looking for.
Yeah, correct.
So you said it was you and two other med students that started it, right? So you guys obviously very, very smart with in the medical area. You don't get your PhD hopefully without having some intellect, but maybe not exactly technical geniuses. So I'm curious with how you got started. You guys had ideas for building apps, but none of you guys were technical by nature, right?
No, well, Rich, one of my partners, he was a information systems somewhat programmed a little bit from University of Michigan before he went to med school. So he had some background in programming, but it was very limited, and he was pretty much out of date by the time we got around to developing Kindu. But we first started when we hired someone in our class. He was kind of the AV guy for our class, and for it was a couple dinners. He built our first Kindu. It was a website based. It was on Ruby. I think it was Ruby on Rails. And because that was before apps were really around, and so it was purely based on online, and you would log in, and then each partner would log in from their own desktops, and that's how they did it. And then then with the advent of smartphones and apps, and that we saw that as a much better platform, and then we ultimately found someone on Craigslist to do our first app. It was on iOS, and so that was sort of our first foray into the mobile world.
So you just went out and just found someone on Craigslist, and you used somebody that you knew to pull off the first one. And
the first one was really, it was such a basic one, and then the yeah, I mean, I wish I would have saved screenshots of it, because it was pretty archaic. And then the second, so then we had this other one that was on iOS, and we just stumbled through all like the wireframes, and he was our programmer at that time. He was kind of just learning the process too, so he kind of stumbled through with us, and then it was and then we just had that one. So and then at that time we were there wasn't the there's a lot of systems in place for app designers now that wasn't there then. There was really no analytics. There was no easy ways of figuring out your marketing and your demographics. So it was a much more difficult time then.
Yeah, we're a little bit out of the Stone Age now, but it's still, people forget easily that iPhones weren't around 10 years ago. And this whole market just kind of sprang up, and there are still kind of processes and things being written around it. So you kind of were one of the pioneers, to my eyes, of somebody that's just jumped into this full hog and kind of helped develop those systems as you go along.
Yeah, it was. It's funny looking back at those times, because we were even we were considering doing BlackBerry, which would have been I think a waste of money, and there was other at that time they were trying to sell other type platforms that would serve all of them, but obviously none of those really actually worked. And then, and then after that, I got paired up with, my friend Rob Green, who he he designed our Android version, and he was the Android developer, and he was telling us, Android's going to be big, and it was just starting to kind of hit the market, and so we had him do our Android version, and then and yeah, it was pretty incredible how Android took off.
Yeah, it's not it's not small potatoes anymore. No, especially if you're playing worldwide. It's kind of the main player right now.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, and then there was at that time there was Nokia too was big, kind of in like the European markets, and but again, we didn't invest in that, and I'm glad we didn't, because it would have been I think kind of a waste.
Yeah, it's funny how that Windows Phone market just kind of went to zero real quick.
Yeah.
And it's either luck or just the right place at the right time, that you didn't go down those pathways and you kind of stuck to just iOS and Android. It ended up being the right move.
Yeah, I think so.
So along those same lines, is a lot of your user base in the US, or is it more worldwide?
I would say the majority is Western, European countries, it seems like. But part of that too is the fact that we don't have it in other languages. Because just with our content, the subject matter doesn't easily translate. And so we would really need specialized people to translate this. We're working on Spanish. But we haven't wanted to go into those other markets because, one, we don't know, we have to be careful of cultural norms in different countries, and we really don't want to upset the sensibilities of other countries, and we really will need a cultural ambassador to help us design the content for those places so that we don't offend anyone.
That makes sense. Yeah, you wouldn't want to walk into, say, for example, like Saudi Arabia. You wouldn't want to walk into a country like that and be full on sexual explicit content. You'd be thrown out real quick.
Yeah, exactly. And then we're always teetering that line. I mean, we've always wanted to keep it professional, helpful, and we didn't want to go down the lane of smut. And we wanted to, on the other side, you don't want to be too clinical, and so we wanted to find that sort of happy medium, and also, I mean, thankfully, iOS and Android, they have rules against some adult content. We've always tried to be mindful of that stuff, and I think we've managed to avoid complaints and things, and and so that's the other reason. Is the last thing I'd want to do is offend people in Saudi Arabia and then have them complain, and then somehow lose our standing and with Apple and Google.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's the last person when your business relies on them putting you into their stores. You don't want to make them mad. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So that's it. But we definitely do. I mean, that's one of the fun parts about being an app developer is seeing where especially using the Firebase / Google Analytics, you can see where your app's being used all over the world, and it is pretty fun to see lighten up in Japan and China, and we get quite a few downloads in Philippines and India. But I would say the vast majority are, the European countries, primarily the Scandinavian countries, and then U.S., Canada, and Australia.
Right on. And it's a global market, and I think it's one thing I've seen with all the apps we've worked on is everyone seems to be U.S. centric or Western European centric, but you look and see what's coming in Africa and then in Asia and a lot of those countries that are just starting to get connected to the internet, let alone to smartphones. But as soon as people start getting smartphones in their hands, that's a whole nother 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion people that are going to need content to consume. So as long as you're ready for it, you can do pretty well worldwide as long as you're not U.S. centric.
Yeah, it's true. The other issue is then you start going into the monetization side of it. So yeah, I think you'll we offer packs for 99 cents, and which for the first people in the United States, that isn't that much money. That but for African countries and for more developing nations, that can be quite a bit of money. And so it's thinking about how we can make it accessible to those economies. And so that's going to be the other thing to consider. And then the last thing, the other big thing to consider is bandwidth and the cost for data in those developing nations, because in those developing nations they pay quite a premium for things, and so to constantly have updates that they have to download, or how much data that they actually have to download when they're using your app is very important, and it's something that you really want to consider when you're going after those markets.
That makes a lot of sense. I like to think back to when the iPhone first came out here. I was on like a 2 gigabyte plan, and you were watching real closely, because if you went over, singular at the time, they would definitely charge you a premium for going over that limit. So not everybody has the nice unlimited data plans.
We are very we're very fortunate here with that. Yeah,
to say the least. So along those same lines, you're talking about money and how you can monetize a product like this. So you said you have the in-app purchases. Are you also doing some advertisement type things? Is that kind of how you're planning on subsidizing things, or what's your strategy?
Yeah. So I encourage those that are developing to check out those Google I/O conferences where they talk about monetization. I found those really helpful, and in fact, I think they're this weekend too, so there'll be new ones coming out. But especially when they're talking about AdMob and Firebase and the integration, so I encourage people to check some of those out, because that will give you some good pointers. For us specifically, we've tried a wide range of things, and it's always difficult to figure out the best monetization strategy. Initially, we had, this is back in 2008-9, we were selling $1.99 to get the paid version, and then we had a free version, sort of a tester teaser kind of thing, and that was of course free. So then you would have those kind of conversions, and then the freemium model popped up, and we started doing more just free, trying to drive downloads, and then doing some advertising on the back end. But the advertising, you really do need quite a bit of volume to make any kind of significant money with that. And then we tried some affiliate marketing, where we did some more focused advertising, where you would there's affiliate marketing companies, like there's Pepper Jam and CJ affiliates that you can work with, that you potentially get links and put those in, and then you get 20 to 30% of whatever traffic or sales that you send their way. But that again is really it's not the most fruitful, especially on the mobile side of things. So now we've got more of an in-app purchase model, but at the same time, we're planning on doing some more advertising, especially as we go into the more international communities. So it's going to be more of a hybrid model, and that's the models that they talk about on with Google I/O and Firebase. And they even have nice dashboards of kind of helping you understand how much revenue per user you're getting, and the lifetime value of various users. So that's I think going to be the future of monetization.
That's really helpful. I think a lot of people will get. I'll make sure I link those in the show notes too, so that people can get a chance to watch those. Because I agree, it's if you're gonna play in this space, and as you've seen over time, you can't just say, well, we're going to go this route with monetization and then slap your hands together and say, that's it, I'm done. It's never, I'm done. And nothing in this space is ever, I'm done. There's always things that are changing and evolving, and monetization is one of those things. Like you said, it used to be you'd go down to Best Buy and spend $50 on a CD-ROM, put that in your computer and install it, and that was your app. And then that model has over time evolved into, well, everything's free, but then if you want extra features, extra content, whatever it might be per bundle or whatever, in-app purchase that way. So it makes sense that you've been kind of evolving as time goes on.
You have to evolve in every facet of the app business. I think is evolving. It constantly is. Monetization, features, some of those things, definitely.
That's awesome. It's always something to be mindful of, but I think I've got a couple other questions here, so okay. I'm gonna to pivot onwards. So one thing with your app in particular, I think all apps, it's really important to keep user privacy in mind, but with Kindu specifically, you're dealing with some pretty sensitive material, and I think part of being able to handle that material is building a level of trust with your users. So I wonder, what steps are you taking, first of all, to just ensure like your data is private when you upload it into Kindu, but then on a deeper level, what steps are you taking really to try to build trust with your users?
It's funny how it never even crossed my mind at first. So I have to be honest, back in 2008, 2009, we didn't really think much of that. We thought of ourselves as of course we were going to keep it, private, and we wouldn't,
right.
And we just, and I don't think it occurred to us, the kind of black hat operations that are going on all over, the internet, and that hacking and all this would be there. And so at first we, really didn't think much of it. And then it was later on, there was the Ashley Madison hack, where it was, it's in a kind of a dating site, but it's more for affairs, and that was hacked, and people were being blackmailed and all that, and that was really, and we were actually right in the process of doing kind of a revamp and almost a complete overhaul, and so that made us really think more about privacy, and so what our biggest safeguard was anonymity. We really didn't want any kind of identifying data stored on our servers that could identify people. So we had, a username that we encourage people to make it, anonymous, or, not at all linked, don't use your email, don't use your name, don't use any of those things. And so we tried to keep it sort of so that you had sort of a Kindu avatar that was not attached to any other, real life situation. So in the event of a hacking, that they would get this data, but they wouldn't know who it was and who it applied to. And then on the other side of it, it's, talking with our developers and making sure that we have, the up-to-date software security and making sure all that is secure. But it doesn't seem, people haven't been, I haven't ever gotten an email about, concerns about their privacy. Who knows? Maybe people look at it and say, boy, I'm not, going to share this stuff. But it seems like for the most part, people aren't that concerned by it. And even though we encourage people not to use their names, sometimes they'll use an email or something like that. So, I don't know. I guess in the age of, social media and Facebook and all that, it seems like, people are okay with that. But
yeah, sorry to jump in. I think also with all of this, as you see kind of the Cambridge Analytica stuff come out with Facebook, and you see some other things, it's something I've been talking about for years. Is as a developer, people don't understand how easy it is to get all this data on you. And I think as people, maybe people don't care, maybe there's not anything to be embarrassed about, but just having even this, if you even would want to have privacy, you couldn't have it truly fully unless you were a next level hacker. And so it's really on folks like you and me on the back end doing everything we can, at least I feel like us as the good guys of trying to like anonymize things as much as we possibly can and do the defaults, set the defaults to be as private as possible, so that people aren't just exposing data. Like it's not, the point of using the app isn't to have your data leaked everywhere. It's on us to kind of protect that data and do the best that we can to protect it.
And that's where we try to use cutting edge technologies to protect people's data, but then at the same time, in the event that they wouldn't be able to know that it was them, because we don't store anything, that everything's attached to a username, which we try to keep, anonymous.
Right. That's exactly how it should be.
Yeah.
So along those same lines, I mean, people aren't requesting privacy necessarily, but I'm sure you do get a lot of feature requests from customers. How do you find out what features? I mean, you've been doing this for almost 10 years now. How do you know which way? Do you just kind of come up with an idea for a feature and just throw it in there? Do you poll your users? How do you come up with what features you're going to be working on next?
So some of them are, just from my friends and friends using it, myself using it, like, oh, this would be really helpful. This would be cool. Others, it's people writing to me and saying like, could we have this or could we do this? And then, you start to get multiple, people wanting the same, with the same requests. And then you figure that's sort of the tip of the iceberg, and there's thousands of people out there that also want that, but they haven't taken the time to write to you. So you generalize based on some of those requests, and then a lot of them too are just looking at irritations, so there's people that request things, and then there's people that complain about things, and so when they complain about things that are there, then you work to fix those complaints.
It seems it's very similar to how the federal government works, in the sense of not everybody is writing their congressman to tell them that they're mad about a law, but if 300 people write in about something, they can extrapolate and assume that means it's a strong representation.
Yeah. So that's it. And I encourage people to pay attention to that. Early on, I mean, it was partly I was too busy. I was in residency, and I was, so there was a time when Kindu was really on autopilot, and I didn't take always the time to get back to people and really, listen to what our users are saying. That I do encourage that for especially newer users, because you've got all these people that really want to help you, and it's amazing how people really get into you get these sort of I want to say fanatics, but these people that have really adopted they really like what you're writing or creating, and so then they get involved, and I mean, I get people that troubleshoot and find bugs, and they figure out exactly what was causing the bug within there, and it's pretty impressive, some of those users out there.
Yeah, it's really cool when you do get one or two people that at least know technology that are using your app, because then when you ask them, if somebody says this app doesn't work, you get probably a lot of people who just say that and don't really know how to properly go through and debug it and give you reproducible steps. But then it's nice when you get the one bug report on occasion where it's like, follow these 6 steps and here's how the bug happens. And then
really give it
us on the developer side kind of jump up and down and enjoy, because then we just knock that bug out. It's the ones where it's like, I don't know what happened, but now I don't don't have a picture that shows up anymore or something, and you just kind of have to try to figure that out.
Yep, yeah.
It's the world's most boring game of Where's Waldo at that point. So with your customers here, so how do you market an app like this? I feel like that's got to be one of your perennial challenges, is trying to figure out where you go to tell people, because it is such a cool and useful tool. But I could see people, seeing something sexual in nature and just instantly shying away. And I know you're moving away from the just being in the bedroom type of thing. That might be how you're helping. But if you could kind of walk me through how you were doing it when it was kind of just an in the bedroom type of app, and now that you're kind of branching out, what are your thoughts on attracting new people into your app?
Well, I mean, I've never actually marketed it. I haven't, because before I put money into actually marketing it, I wanted to have, an MVP that worked, and a product that I was, really proud of. And there was sort of little iterations that I wanted to make and improvements before I really wanted to mass market it. So, truth be told, I haven't really marketed it yet. There's been a little bit of organic growth, I guess, and it seems to, people like it. I don't know. I mean, I guess there's been some threads on Reddit, and then, we get occasional press here and there about it. And so that's been kind of it. It's been a little bit more organic. I haven't started doing that. And it was partly, one, because I didn't quite get it to where I wanted it. I'm pretty close now. And then also the monetization. The nature of Kindu is somewhat, you use it, you get through it, and then you have all these things, and then you don't use it as much. Yeah, it's not something that you're going to come to every day. And it's more almost like in lines with a book, but you probably come back to a little bit more than a book. And so I wanted to really make sure that we had a way to monetize, early on, so that when people came to it, that we could at least get some revenue out of it. So I haven't marketed. I plan to soon, and then in doing so, I plan on doing it more the route through Google. And again, I bring up Firebase and Google Analytics and IO, and it seems like that's the best way of doing it, because with Firebase, you kind of think of it as, there's the app growth, the monetization, and then there's sort of a feed forward system with that, and then as the users, you look at how the users behave, and then you create new features, and then and hopefully that inspires more users, and then more monetization. And I feel like that Firebase system could really help with that, because it brings together potential ways of marketing through Google Ads and through AdMob, and then also it helps you keep track of where your monetization capabilities are, and the best groups and segments to help you monetize. So then it goes and keeps marketing towards those. So I'm hoping in the future that that's going to be the best area to do marketing.
I'm just still kind of floored that you haven't done any real marketing, because you have hundreds and thousands of users in your system, don't you?
Yeah. I do.
So doing organic growth of really not spending much money on telling people about the app, and just having it grow really organically, almost completely, that's really, it's kind of a testament to you found the right hammer for the nail,
Yeah. Yeah, almost there. We're getting there close, and then but I mean, again, it's been years, and I think it was sort of a different market. A lot of those users that we got were earlier on when it was much easier to be found. I mean, back then, I don't know what the current amount of apps are, but, there might have been, say 5,000 apps compared to 1 million apps.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah, it was easier to be found, 10 years ago. But yeah, I think overall, it seems like there's people that really like the app, which it's always pretty cool, getting emails thanking you, when they really found something new or brought them closer to their partner, which makes you feel good.
What are you looking forward to for the future of Kindu here? Are you just kind of looking forward to expanding it out, or getting up to the millions of users, or what excites you really about moving forward here with Kindu?
I mean, part of it is you have this picture of how it's going to be in your mind, and wanting to see it completed. So that's part of it. But I do. I look forward to getting to the point of where I'm ready to promote it and market it, and also seeing the users using it all over the world, and there's just something really kind of cool about that. And of course, the revenue. I'm not gonna lie about that.
I suppose it's app development's not cheap, so I bet getting
that's the hard part. Especially you get a lot of users that are angry, that complain that you're trying to monetize, and that they're disappointed that you're charging for certain content, and it's it's frustrating because it's like, well, the server fees and the programmers and all that stuff aren't cheap. They're not working for free, so you can't just give away your product for free.
Right, and that's the hard part is people will go to Starbucks and drop $6 on a coffee without even thinking about it. But as soon as you put 99-cent barrier in their face for this product that they'll actually get a ton of ongoing use out of, it's just a mental barrier that we as product owners have to overcome.
Yeah, and I think that's. There was sort of a life cycle there. Early on, back in like 2008, 2009, I remember having friends that would pay $3.99 to get an app that allowed you to look like you were drinking a beer or pouring out a beer, or a flame that looked like a lighter, and so early on people were paying a lot. They were gladly paying money for these novel things. And then that freemium model sort of came in, and then everyone just kind of felt entitled to they wanted everything for free. And now I think it's starting to swing back, somewhat to, people are a little bit more understanding of having to pay some things. But you're completely right. Myself included, I'll tip someone, $1 for bringing me a beer. But then, I'll think twice before I, download an app that I'll probably use for a long time for 99 cents.
Right. It's interesting how the trend's going. If we have this conversation 10 years from now, there'll be some other way of doing it, or the markets will shift and stuff. And so it's just another example of how this space is just always evolving and changing.
Yeah. So, that's we'll see where it goes. But I mean, especially even when I think of Kindu, where the value of these ideas, and we offer about 800 ideas for free, and I remember in researching things, that there'd be books. You buy at Barnes and Noble for $15 for 300 ideas, and here we're given 800 some ideas for free. And people, complain when you try to charge after that, whereas for those ideas, that would have cost them $45 back then.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts trying to figure out how to deal with that. But I've got confidence that you'll pull through it. It seems like the future is bright.
Yeah, I hope so.
If you were able to talk to yourself 10 years ago and kind of paint a picture of what the road was to come, what advice would you give for somebody in those shoes where, again, 10 years ago, you hadn't really had much technical experience. You just had the idea and you just wanted to jump in and, assuming that person is here now and not, not 10 years ago, where like we just talked about how the landscape has changed. What advice would you give for somebody in your shoes trying to start right now?
Well, so for right now, I mean, I think that there are so many more great tools available. Pay attention to what users are doing. Looking at, one, where are you losing users? So in the sign up process, is there a spot, you can really kind of see where your users are falling off, maybe where they're getting frustrated. Those sorts of things. I would start, really kind of thinking of, before you start, having, a monetization plan and then testing it. And then if it doesn't work out, switch gears, because like you said, there's a lot of, there's a lot of learning involved. So you're constantly learning, what's the best way to monetize. You're constantly learning, what's the best way to keep your users engaged. And then I can't speak for experience quite yet, but what's the best way to, bring users in and help app growth? Because that'll be the next frontier, I think, for me is that, like, oh, well, I thought it was going to be these users, but it turns out it's these users. And and who knows, maybe Saudi Arabia will be the spot that actually, we get, a great following, like that. Yeah. That's been kind of the surprise and actually the coolest. One of the cooler things is you think all this stuff and then you realize you don't.
So it's making sure you're always learning and always trying to find what is next and what's changing on the horizon, making sure that you're able to adapt your app to fit that.
Yeah. And also just, the scientific method and, in medicine, we always talk about the evidence-based medicine, what's data driven and we thought that, a low-fat diet was the way to go. And then all of a sudden we realized, hey, that's not actually the case. And it's sort of the same thing, that's sort of how the app business is analogous to medicine is sometimes what you thought was, one way and then the data doesn't back it up. And that's the great thing about the app business is you've got a lot of data. You can see user behavior. You can see where you're losing them. You can see what they actually use and what they don't use. And so that's definitely a part where I wish I had paid more attention to it earlier on.
That's really useful. I think that's tremendous advice for somebody that's just getting started in this space. And I was going to ask you about since you are a doctor by trade, how that compares. And I think that's a really or what lessons you can take away from that and apply to the app business. But I think you already just hit the nail on the head with using the scientific method and like you said, evidence-based medicine of use the facts. You have so much data that you can collect and use. You don't have to. We were just talking about user privacy and stuff. It's not like we're looking at people's individual answers to the questions and seeing how those trends. That's not the trends we're talking about with the data. It's more of just generally, if I go from the home screen and I tap on this button and I tap on this button, are people actually following that path, or are they getting to the screen from a different route? And just trying to optimize those things so that you're giving your users the best chance of having success inside the app.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And thank you for clarifying because you're completely right. It's more of a macro look at the data and what with and that's really why I'm such a proponent of Firebase and Google Analytics, because you can see okay, well, you had let's just say 1,000 users a day entering into that home screen, but then only half of them hit this the next screen. And what happened in between those two screens that you lost half your people? And then you can start doing little tweaks, like maybe the wording is wrong, or maybe the button didn't work, or so that you can really start kind of testing and figure out those little flaws in your app. And that's why I strongly encourage, going through a lot of that, the IO, those, you can go on their website and they have all the videos that you can watch. And yeah, I'd sit on at the treadmill at the gym and watch those because they're helpful.
Yeah, they are a tremendous resource for somebody that's just cracking into this space and even you're not even cracking into the space. You've been in here for 10 years, but even still, we have Google I/O has a ton of videos, and Apple has WWDC, which also has quite a few videos that you can look through and see how they're the platform owners, and they can see what's worked across all 1.5 million apps.
Mm-hmm.
So standing on those shoulders and not trying to reinvent the wheel, but work with some established systems. We're not in the Stone Age of 2008 anymore.
No.
There are good analytics packages and there are good monetization strategies that people can take away.
Mm-hmm.
This is great. How can people find out more about Kindu if they want to check out the app or learn more about what you've got going on over in that area?
So you can go to our website. It's www.kindu.us or US, and then or just if you just search Kindu for couples, and it's KINDU for couples, and that's on in the App Store and on Google Play.
How did you come up with the name Kindu?
Well, that's funny. We had so many ideas, and it was a lot of like thesaurus. We were using thesaurus. We were using and just you kind of go down these threads of trying to come up with. We were trying to think of like Spark or Match or something like that. And we actually at one point stumbled on. We were considering Twitter, and it was taken, but we had never heard of it. And we had considered Tinder, because that was like both of those sort of like mean kind of like a spark kind of thing. And Tinder was taken, but that didn't exist yet. And then we all as a group couldn't really decide on anything. And so one of our friends was he had done some humanitarian work down in the Congo, and he was in Kindu. It's a country there, and we liked the name, and then we also liked the fact that it didn't have any real meaning here. No one really it doesn't mean anything really in English, and then it sort of has that you can do it. So that was sort of where we came up with it, and yeah. It's
funny, like if you were, I remember back in 2008 trying to come up with names, and it seemed like in 2008 it was horrible to try to come up with a cool, clever name. And just fast forward 10 years, I didn't even think it could get worse, but it's even worse now. Like it's so hard to come up with names. That's like the worst part of this whole. At least for me, I'm not a marketer. I mean, obviously you're not, since you haven't done any marketing on your own. And so for both of us, it seems like the branding and marketing thing is probably the hardest part of mobile app development.
Yeah. So it really is. And you got to resist the temptation to do a pun. Because most people, we had so many dumb puns that we wanted to do for a name, and we decided to go with something more that didn't have any real connotation to it. So it's sort of like, our thought was sort of like Toyota or Honda or, any of those things where it's like, you don't know what does that mean? So,
right.
So, we wanted to give it.
And I mean, like you probably couldn't name it like Ford either if you're,
no,
you don't want to name something like this after your last
and
name.
Things like that too.
Well, this is great. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. Is there anything else you want to add, or are you?
I think, I would say the biggest thing is the integration of all those, the marketing, the monetization, the behavior, and so far right now, I think Firebase is the way to go for that. So I encourage checking those things out now, and I'm by no means paid by Google.
If only.
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, and I think you're a great example of somebody who, you're obviously a very smart person, and it doesn't take someone with a deep technical background to make an app work. You have other strengths that you can apply in the other side of the business, and that's really where you can focus is work on the monetization strategy, work on how you're going to get users and how you're going to keep them engaged and all of that stuff. There's so much more to app development than just the ones and zeros behind it.
Yeah. That is very true. So, well, thanks for having me. I appreciate having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today, and we'll be talking soon.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Tim.
Our guest today was Tom. You can find out more about him and Kindu at kindu.us. Show notes for this episode can be found at constantvariables.co. You can get in touch with us by emailing hello@constantvariables.co. I'm at Tim Bornholt on Twitter, and the show is at CV_podcast. Today's episode was edited by the exemplary Jordan Doust. This show was brought to you by the Jed Mahonis Group, who builds mobile software solutions for the on-demand economy. Learn more at jmg.mn.